Alright, here's a question that's going to mess with your head a bit. What if I told you that one of history's most influential teachers on freedom was a slave? Not metaphorically. Not enslaved by circumstance, literally owned by another human being. Chained, beaten, property. And yet this man, Epictetus, would go on to teach Roman emperors, shape Western philosophy for 2 millennia, and provide the intellectual framework that would eventually help create modern psychotherapy. His students' notes from his lectures are still bestsellers today. His ideas about resilience got an American admiral through 7 years of torture in a Vietnamese prison camp. Here's what makes this so philosophically fascinating. Epictetus didn't teach freedom despite being enslaved. He taught it because he was enslaved. His philosophy emerged directly from the crucible of powerlessness. He figured out something that most of us, with all our physical freedom, all our choices, all our options, still haven't grasped. And that's what we're here to explore today. Not some dusty academic exercise in ancient philosophy. We're talking about ideas that can fundamentally change how you experience your life. Right now, this week, today. Because here's the thing nobody tells you about Stoicism. It's not about being emotionless or tough or sucking it up. It's about discovering a kind of freedom that no circumstance, no person, no tragedy can ever take from you. The kind of freedom that exists even in chains. So let's dive into the life and teachings of a man who proved that true liberty is an inside job. Birth in Hierapolis, c. 50 AD. Picture this. Somewhere in what's now Turkey, a child is born into slavery. We don't even know his original name. Epictetus literally just means acquired one. Think about that. Your identity is literally the one who was bought. He ends up in Rome serving in the household of Epictetus, who was himself a freed slave working for Emperor Nero. And if you know anything about Nero, we're talking about one of history's most paranoid, violent, unstable rulers. Rome during this period was a powder keg. Political purges, arbitrary executions, the Great Fire of 64 AD that Nero may have started himself. This is the world Epictetus is navigating. No rights, no protection. At the complete mercy of people who could kill him on a whim. There's a story, and we can't verify if it's true, but it's telling that people believed it, that Epictetus was twisting Epictetus's leg, torturing him, and Epictetus calmly said, "You're going to break it." His master kept twisting, the leg broke, and Epictetus simply observed, "I told you that you would break it." Now, whether that actually happened or not, that story captures something essential about the philosophy he would develop. Even in that moment of physical torture, there's this separation between what's happening to his body and what's happening in his mind. He's observing. He's maintaining his inner sovereignty. Freedom and Study, c. 68 AD. Nero dies in 68 AD. Suicide after being declared a public enemy by the Senate. And in the chaos that follows, Epictetus gains his freedom. We don't know exactly how. Maybe Epictetus freed him. Maybe it happened in the political upheaval. But here's where the story gets interesting. He's free now. He could do anything. And what does he choose? He seeks out Musonius Rufus, one of the great Stoic teachers of the era, and becomes his student. Think about what that tells us. He spent his entire life as property. Now he has agency. And his first choice is to study philosophy, not to accumulate wealth, not to seek revenge, not to pursue pleasure he'd been denied. Philosophy. Because here's what he's already figured out. Physical freedom changed his circumstances, but the freedom he really wanted, the freedom that mattered, that was something else entirely. That was something he had to build internally. Exile to Nicopolis, c. 93 AD. Fast forward about 25 years. Epictetus is teaching in Rome, gathering students, developing his philosophy. And then Emperor Domitian, another paranoid autocrat, decides philosophers are dangerous. They ask too many questions. They make people think. So in 93 AD, Domitian expels all philosophers from Rome and Italy. Epictetus, along with others, is banished. And you know what he does? He goes to Nicopolis in Greece and opens a school. Doesn't complain. Doesn't rage against the injustice. Just relocates and keeps teaching. This is Stoicism in action. He can't control Domitian's paranoia. He can't control imperial policy. He can control what he does next. So he does what matters, he teaches. The teaching legacy. Here's what's remarkable. Epictetus lives simply, really simply. Ancient sources say he owned almost nothing, a straw mattress, a simple lamp. He never married until late in life, and then only to raise an orphaned child, but his school in Nicopolis becomes legendary. Students travel from across the Roman Empire to study with this former slave who's figured out something profound about human freedom. And here's the beautiful irony. Among his students, people from the most privileged backgrounds imaginable, wealthy Romans, future senators, and they're sitting at the feet of a man who was once considered property, learning from him about what it means to be truly free. One of those students is Arrian, who will write down Epictetus's lectures and preserve them for us. Because Epictetus himself, he writes nothing. He's not interested in publishing. He's interested in transformation, in actually changing how people live. His philosophy wasn't forged in an ivory tower. It was forged in slavery, in physical suffering, in political oppression. And that's precisely why it works. Because it had to work. It had to function in the worst possible circumstances. When Epictetus teaches about freedom, he's not theorizing. He's not speculating. He's teaching from lived experience. He's saying, I know what it's like to have absolutely no external freedom, and I discovered something that nobody could take from me. That's what we're about to explore. The philosophy of a man who proved that the most important kind of freedom exists entirely within your own mind. All right, so we've got this former slave who's become a legendary teacher. Now let's get to the idea that makes everything else make sense. The concept that's so simple it sounds obvious, and so profound that most people spend their entire lives not getting it. Epictetus says there's exactly one thing you need to understand to be free. Just one. Master this, and everything else follows. Here it is. Some things are up to you. Some things are not up to you. And your entire quality of life depends on knowing the difference. I know what you're thinking. Yeah, obviously. Tell me something I don't know. But hold on. Because we all know this intellectually, and almost none of us live like we know it. Within our control. Look at what Epictetus puts in the within our control column. Really look at it. Our judgments and opinions. Not the events themselves, but what we think about them. Your boss emails you at 10 p.m. That's not up to you. Whether you interpret that as disrespectful or just poor boundaries or a sign they trust you, that's entirely your call. Our desires and aversions. What we want and what we avoid. Now this is tricky because we think our desires just happen to us. I can't help wanting that promotion. But Epictetus is saying, actually you can examine that desire. You can choose what to pursue and what to let go. Our voluntary actions, what we actually do. Not the outcomes of those actions, we'll get to that, but the actions themselves. You control whether you speak up in that meeting. You don't control how people respond. Our attitudes and responses. This is the big one. Someone insults you. You don't control that, but your response? That's yours. Completely, totally, utterly yours. That's it. That's the list. Notice how small it is? Notice how internal it all is? Beyond our control. Now look at the other column. This is where it gets uncomfortable. Other people's thoughts and actions. Your partner's mood. Your colleague's opinion of you. Your parents' approval. Not up to you. You can influence these things, sure, but control them? No. External events and circumstances, the economy, the weather, traffic, that pandemic that just upended everyone's plans, the political situation, all beyond your control, our reputation and status. Oh, this one hurts, because we spend so much energy trying to control what people think of us. We curate our social media, we craft our image, we worry about our reputation. And Epictetus is saying, you're wasting your time. You cannot control how others perceive you. You can only control whether you're actually worthy of a good reputation. Health, wealth, and worldly outcomes. Wait, what? I can't control my health? Well, you can exercise and eat right. Those are actions. Those are up to you. But whether you get cancer, whether the stock market crashes, whether your startup succeeds, the outcome itself, not up to you. Here's where most of us go wrong. We spend probably 90% of our mental and emotional energy on that second column. worrying about what people think, stressing about outcomes we can't control, trying to force other people to change, getting angry at circumstances, and maybe 10% of our energy on the first column, on our own character, on our responses, on what we actually have power over. Epictetus is saying, flip that ratio. Flip it completely. Focus relentlessly on what's within your control. And for everything else, accept it. Not with resignation, not with passivity, but with the recognition that struggling against what you can't control is the definition of suffering. Here's his exact words. Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. Disregarding. Not fighting, not resenting, not wishing we're different. Disregarding. Think about your life right now. What are you trying to control that isn't actually yours to control? Your teenager's choices, the outcome of that job application, whether your in-laws approve of you, how your book sells, whether people like your presentation. Every minute you spend trying to control those things is a minute you're enslaved. Enslaved to outcomes, enslaved to other people's opinions, enslaved to circumstances. And every minute you spend mastering your own responses, developing your character, choosing your actions wisely, that's a minute you're free. This is what Epictetus discovered in chains. This is what sustained him through torture. This is what he taught to emperors and students for decades. The dichotomy of control isn't just a philosophical concept. It's a practice. It's a daily discipline. It's the foundation of everything else we're going to talk about. Now we need to talk about Epictetus's secret weapon. The Greek word is prohairesis. And if you learn nothing else from this lecture, learn this word, because this is your superpower. Prohairesis. It's usually translated as volition, or moral choice, or the faculty of choice. But those translations are too weak. They don't capture what Epictetus means. Think of it this way. Prohairesis is your inner citadel, your unconquerable fortress. The one thing about you that is completely, absolutely, utterly yours and cannot be touched by any external force. Your unconquerable fortress. Here's what Epictetus is saying. You can be enslaved physically. He was. You can be imprisoned. Many of his students were. You can be tortured, impoverished, exiled, humiliated. All of that can happen to your body, your circumstances, your external life. But your prohairesis, your capacity to choose your response, to maintain your moral character, to decide what kind of person you're going to be, that cannot be touched. Not by tyrants. Not by misfortune. Not even by death. Listen to how he puts it. No man is free who is not master of himself. Not, no man is free who is enslaved. Not, no man is free who is imprisoned. No man is free who is not master of himself. Of his own will. Of his own choices. This is revolutionary. Because it means freedom isn't a circumstance. It's a state of mind. It's a practice. It's something you cultivate internally regardless of what's happening externally. Think about what this meant for Epictetus personally. He's a slave. Someone else owns his body, can force him to work, can beat him, can sell him, but his prohairesis, his inner sovereignty, that remains his own. When his master is twisting his leg, Epictetus can't control what's being done to his body, but he can control his response. He can maintain his equanimity. He can observe what's happening without being destroyed by it. That's prohairesis in action, modern application. Now let's bring this into your life, because you're probably not enslaved. You're probably not being tortured, but you're still not free. Not in the way Epictetus means. You're enslaved to your boss's moods, to the outcome of that project, to whether you get the promotion, to what your family thinks of your life choices, to your anxiety about the future, to your regret about the past. All of that is surrendering your prohairesis. You're giving away your inner sovereignty to external things. Your boss can control your schedule. They cannot control your character. They cannot make you resentful unless you choose resentment. They cannot make you bitter unless you choose bitterness. Your partner can hurt your feelings. They cannot make you cruel in response. They cannot determine whether you respond with dignity or with vengeance. That's your prohairesis. The economy can destroy your savings. It cannot destroy your integrity. It cannot make you less virtuous. It cannot touch who you are as a person. This is what Epictetus means by the unconquerable fortress. Build this internal sovereignty strong enough, and nothing external can truly harm you. Practical exercise. Here's what I want you to do tonight. Seriously, do this. It's ancient Stoic practice that Epictetus himself taught. Before you go to sleep, review your day. Not to beat yourself up, that's not the point. To observe, to learn, to strengthen your prohairesis. Ask yourself, which situations today triggered strong reactions? Maybe your colleague took credit for your idea. Maybe you got stuck in traffic. Maybe your kid ignored your advice. Maybe someone was rude to you online. Then ask, what was actually within my control in that situation? Not their action, that's done, but your response, your interpretation, your choice about what to do next. Finally, how might I respond differently tomorrow? Not beating yourself up for how you responded today. Just planning, preparing, strengthening that muscle of choice. This isn't about being perfect. It's about being intentional. It's about reclaiming your prohairesis one choice at a time. Do this every night for a week. You'll start noticing something. You'll catch yourself in the moment. Right when you're about to react automatically, you'll pause. You'll remember, wait, I have a choice here. This is my prohairesis. That pause, that tiny moment of awareness, that's freedom beginning. The real power. Here's what's so powerful about this concept. Once you really get it, once you internalize that your prohairesis is unconquerable, you become incredibly difficult to manipulate, to intimidate, to control, because what can anyone threaten you with? Your body? Okay, but that's not you. Your reputation? That's not yours to control anyway. Your possessions? External. Your life itself? Well, even that is beyond your control ultimately. The only thing that's truly yours is your character, your choices, your responses, your prohairesis. And nobody can touch that without your permission. This is why Epictetus could be free in chains. This is why Admiral Stockdale could survive 7 years of torture in a Vietnamese prison camp with his humanity intact. This is why people throughout history have faced death with dignity and courage. They understood what Epictetus taught. You are unconquerable. Not your body, not your circumstances, but you, your essential self, your moral character, your capacity for choice. That is a fortress that cannot be breached. The question is, are you going to claim that power? Are you going to stop giving your prohairesis away to circumstances, to other people's opinions, to outcomes you can't control? Because that's what Stoicism is really about. Not being emotionless, not being tough, but being sovereign, being free, being the master of the one thing you actually can master, yourself. Okay, so you've got the dichotomy of control. You understand prohairesis. Now comes the question everyone asks. Great, but how do I actually live this way? What does this look like in practice? Because here's the thing. Epictetus isn't giving you a philosophy to think about. He's giving you a philosophy to live. And that means we need to talk about what he means by living according to nature and reason, virtue as harmony. When Epictetus talks about virtue, forget everything the Victorians taught you. He's not talking about prudishness or rigid morality or being a goody two-shoes. He's talking about excellence of character, about living in harmony with your nature as a rational being in a rational universe. Here's the Stoic view. The universe operates according to reason. It's not chaos, it's not random. There's a logos, a rational principle, running through everything. And you're a piece of that logos. You're a rational creature in a rational cosmos. So virtue means aligning yourself with that rationality. It means using your reason to guide your choices. It means developing excellence in the specifically human capacities, wisdom, justice, courage, and self-discipline. Think about it this way. A knife's virtue is sharpness. That's what makes it excellent at being a knife. A runner's virtue is speed and endurance. And a human being's virtue? It's rational, moral excellence. It's becoming the best version of what a human can be. And here's what's crucial. This is the only thing that's genuinely good according to Epictetus. Not wealth. That's external, beyond your control. Not health. Also external. Not reputation, not success, not pleasure. The only thing that's genuinely, intrinsically good is your character, your virtue, the quality of your soul. Everything else? It's what the Stoics call preferred indifference. Yeah, we'd prefer to be healthy rather than sick, wealthy rather than poor. But these things don't make you a better or worse person. They're morally neutral. What makes you good or bad is how you use them, how you respond to them, whether you maintain your virtue regardless of whether you have them. This is why Epictetus could be virtuous as a slave. This is why Marcus Aurelius had to work just as hard to be virtuous as an emperor, because virtue isn't about your circumstances, it's about your character. Trusting providence. Now this is where some people get uncomfortable, because Epictetus talks about trusting providence, about accepting that the universe is governed by justice and goodness. And you might be thinking, really? Look around. Wars, pandemics, injustice, children suffering. That's a just and good universe? Here's what Epictetus means. And this is subtle, so stay with me. He's not saying everything that happens is good. He's not saying suffering doesn't matter. He's saying the universe operates according to rational principles, and your job is to align yourself with those principles rather than fighting against reality. It's not blind faith. It's reasoned acceptance of what is. Think about it. You can't change the past. You can't control most of the future. You can't make the universe operate differently than it does. So you have two choices. 1. Rage against reality. Wish things were different. Torment yourself with should have and if only, and why me? Spend your energy fighting what you cannot change. 2. Accept what is and focus your energy on responding virtuously to it. Use your prohairesis to choose your response. Maintain your character regardless of circumstances. Epictetus chose option 2, not because he was passive, not because he didn't care about justice, but because he understood that you can't fight for justice if you're constantly fighting against reality. This is what he means by piety, this reverence for the rational order of things. It's not religious in the way we usually think, it's philosophical. It's saying, the universe operates according to principles I didn't create and can't change. My job is to understand those principles and live in harmony with them. Welcoming challenges. Now here's where Epictetus gets really hardcore, really challenging. Because he doesn't just say, accept difficulties, he says welcome them. There's this famous prayer attributed to him, and whether he actually said it or not, it captures his philosophy perfectly. Send me trials, for I have the means to endure them with honor. Read that again. Send me trials. Not, help me avoid difficulties. Not, make my life easy. Send me challenges, because I have the capacity to meet them virtuously. Why would anyone pray for difficulties? Because Epictetus understands something profound. Virtue isn't theoretical. You can't develop courage without facing fear. You can't develop patience without facing frustration. You can't develop resilience without facing hardship. Difficulties aren't punishments. They're opportunities. They're the gym where you build moral strength. Think about physical training. You don't get stronger by lifting light weights. You get stronger by pushing against resistance. The resistance isn't your enemy. It's your teacher. It's what makes you stronger. Same with character. You don't develop virtue in easy circumstances. You develop it by facing challenges and choosing to respond virtuously anyway. Your annoying colleague? That's an opportunity to practice patience. Your financial setback? That's a chance to demonstrate resilience and resourcefulness. Your failure? That's where you learn humility and persistence. Now, I'm not saying you should seek out suffering for its own sake. That's masochism, not stoicism. But when difficulties come, and they will come, Epictetus is saying don't waste them. Use them. Let them make you better. Here's a modern example. You lose your job. Devastating, right? Beyond your control. But your response, that's yours. You can become bitter, resentful, paralyzed. Or you can maintain your dignity, reassess your priorities, discover new opportunities. The job loss itself is neither good nor bad. It's your response that determines whether it strengthens or weakens your character. This is living according to nature and reason. This is virtue in action, not avoiding life's difficulties, but meeting them with excellence of character. And here's what's remarkable. When you live this way, you become incredibly resilient. Not because nothing bothers you, Epictetus wasn't emotionless, but because you know that whatever happens, you have the capacity to respond well. You have your prohairesis, you have your virtue, and those can't be taken from you. All right, now we need to talk about something that makes Epictetus different from a lot of philosophers. Because most philosophy, especially academic philosophy, is about ideas, about arguments, about theory. Epictetus, he's about transformation. He's about actually changing how you live. Listen to how he puts it. It's not what happens to you, but how you react that matters. Simple, right? Sounds like something you'd see on a motivational poster. But actually living it? That's the work of a lifetime. Character in action. Here's what Epictetus understood. Philosophy isn't something you study, it's something you do. It's not about knowing the right answers, it's about becoming a certain kind of person. Think about it this way. You can read every book about fitness. You can understand the science of muscle growth, optimal nutrition, training principles. But if you never actually go to the gym, you're not fit. Knowledge without practice is worthless. Same with philosophy. You can understand Stoic theory perfectly. You can ace the exam on the dichotomy of control. But if you're still enslaved to your anger, your anxiety, your need for approval, you haven't actually learned anything that matters. Epictetus ran a school. Students came to study with him. And you know what he told them? The lecture hall is a hospital for the soul. A hospital. Not a library, not a debate club. A place where you come to be healed, to be transformed, to become better than you are. His lectures weren't meant to be entertaining or intellectually impressive. They were meant to be medicine. Sometimes bitter medicine. He would challenge his students, confront them, force them to examine their lives. There's a story about a student who came to him and said, "I want to learn philosophy." And Epictetus said, "Are you prepared to be ridiculed, to be mocked, to have people think you're strange?" Because living philosophically meant being different. It meant not chasing the same things everyone else chased. This is ethics as a way of life. It's not about memorizing rules. It's about training yourself, daily, constantly, relentlessly, to respond virtuously to whatever life throws at you. Radical responsibility. Now here's where Epictetus gets really uncomfortable, really challenging. He says, no more complaints, no more blame, no more excuses, ever. Wait, what? But sometimes things really aren't our fault. Sometimes we're victims of circumstances. Sometimes other people really do wrong us. Epictetus agrees, other people's actions aren't your responsibility. Circumstances aren't your fault. But your response, that's 100% on you. Someone wrongs you, not your fault. But whether you become consumed by resentment, that's your choice. Whether you let it poison your character, your choice. Whether you seek revenge or maintain your dignity, your choice. This is radical responsibility. It's saying, I am completely, totally, utterly responsible for my own character, for my own virtue, for the quality of my own soul. Not for outcomes. Those are often beyond our control. Not for other people. They have their own prohairesis. But for me, for my responses, for my choices, for who I'm becoming. This is incredibly empowering and incredibly demanding at the same time. Empowering because it means you're not a victim. You're not helpless. You always have agency over the one thing that matters most, your character. Demanding because it means you can't blame anyone else. You can't say, they made me angry. No, they did something. You chose anger. You can't say, circumstances forced me to compromise my integrity. No, circumstances happened. You chose your response. Epictetus is basically saying, grow up, take ownership. Stop giving your power away by blaming external things for your internal state. Response, not reaction. Here's how this works in practice. Epictetus teaches this three-step process. First, the impression. Something happens. Someone cuts you off in traffic. Your boss criticizes your work. You get a medical diagnosis. That's the impression, the raw event. Second, the judgment. This is where most people go wrong. We immediately interpret the impression. That driver is an idiot. My boss hates me. This is terrible. We add meaning, usually negative meaning, automatically. Third, the response. Based on our judgment, we react, we get angry, we feel anxious, we become defensive. But here's what Epictetus teaches. There's a space between the impression and the judgment, a moment where you have choice. And that moment is everything. The event itself is neutral. It's your interpretation that creates suffering or serenity. It's your judgment that enslaves or frees you. So the practice is this. When something happens, pause. Don't react automatically. Examine the impression. Ask yourself, what's actually happening here? What's within my control? What's the virtuous response? Someone insults you, that's the impression. Your automatic judgment might be, they're attacking me, I need to defend myself. But pause. Is your reputation within your control? No. Is their opinion of you within your control? No. What is within your control? Your response. Your character. Whether you maintain your dignity. So maybe the virtuous response is to ignore it, or to respond with humor, or to examine whether there's truth in the criticism, but not to be enslaved by it. Not to let someone else's words determine your internal state. This is the work. This is the daily practice. Catching yourself between impression and reaction. Choosing your response consciously, rather than reacting automatically from habit or passion. And here's what's beautiful. This is exactly what modern cognitive behavioral therapy teaches. CBT, developed by Aaron Beck in the 1960s, is basically Stoicism with clinical trials. It's the same insight. Events don't cause our emotions. Our interpretations of events cause our emotions. Change the interpretation, change the emotion. Epictetus figured this out 2,000 years ago, not through research studies, through lived experience, through philosophical reflection, through teaching students how to actually be free. The daily work. So, what does this look like practically? How do you actually live this way? You practice every single day. You treat it like training. Morning. You prepare. You remind yourself what's within your control and what isn't. You anticipate challenges. You mentally rehearse virtuous responses. Throughout the day, you catch yourself. When you feel strong emotions arising, you pause. You examine your judgments. You choose your response. Evening. You review. What went well? Where did you fall short? What will you do differently tomorrow? Not to beat yourself up, with compassion, but with honesty. This is what Epictetus taught. This is what his students practiced. This is what transforms philosophy from theory into lived wisdom. Because here's the truth. You can understand everything we've talked about intellectually and still be enslaved, still be anxious, still be angry, still be unhappy. The understanding is just the beginning. The transformation comes from practice, from daily disciplined effort to align your life with these principles. Epictetus proved it's possible. A slave became one of history's freest human beings, not by changing his circumstances, by changing himself, by mastering his own responses, by developing his character regardless of external conditions. The question is, will you do the work? So here's what happened. Epictetus spent decades teaching in Nicopolis. Hundreds of students came through his school, and he wrote nothing, not a single word. Why? Because for Epictetus, philosophy wasn't about publishing. It wasn't about building a reputation as a great thinker. It was about transformation, about changing lives, about teaching people how to be free. But one of his students, a guy named Arrian, thought, this is too important to lose. So he did something remarkable. He wrote down Epictetus's lectures as faithfully as he could. Those became the discourses, 4 books of Epictetus's teachings. And then Arrian did something even more brilliant. He took the essence of those lectures and distilled them into 53 short chapters. A handbook, a manual you could carry with you. Study daily. Reference in moments of crisis. That's the Enchiridion. And Enchiridion literally means handbook, something you keep in hand. It's meant to be portable, practical, always accessible. A timeless manual. Think about what Arrian was doing. He was creating the original self-help book, but actually helpful. Not 10 easy steps to happiness. Not manifest your dreams. Real, rigorous, tested, philosophical wisdom compressed into a format you could use every single day. And it worked. The Enchiridion has been in continuous circulation for nearly 2,000 years. It's been translated into every major language. It's been studied by Christians, Muslims, secular philosophers. It's influenced everyone from Marcus Aurelius to Thomas Jefferson to modern psychotherapists. Why? Because it works. Because the wisdom in it is genuinely practical. Because you can open it to almost any chapter and find something that applies to your life right now. Core maxims. Let me give you a taste of what's in there. Chapter 1, the very first thing, is the dichotomy of control we've already talked about. Some things are up to us, some are not. That's where it starts. That's the foundation everything else builds on. Chapter 5. Men are disturbed not by things but by the views which they take of them. There's your CBT, right there. 2,000 years before Aaron Beck. Chapter 8. Don't demand that things happen as you wish, but wish that they happen as they do, and you will go on well. That's radical acceptance. That's trusting providence. That's freedom from constantly fighting against reality. Chapter 13. If you wish to improve, be content to appear foolish and stupid in externals. In other words, stop caring so much about your reputation. Stop performing for others. Focus on actually being good, not appearing good. Chapter 20. Remember that it is not he who reviles or strikes you who insults you, but it is your opinion about these things as being insulting. Your response is yours. Always. See what Arian did? Each chapter is a principle you can practice, a lens you can look through, a tool you can use, and here's what's brilliant. The Enchiridion doesn't require you to read it cover to cover. You can open it anywhere, read one chapter, meditate on it, practice it that day. It's modular, flexible, designed for real life. Practical wisdom. Make the best use of what is in your power, and take the rest as it happens. That sentence right there? That's the entire philosophy in one line. Make the best use of what is in your power, that's virtue. That's focusing on your prohairesis. That's taking responsibility for your character and choices, and take the rest as it happens. That's acceptance. That's not fighting against what you can't control. That's trusting providence. Do those two things, and you're living stoically. Do those two things, and you're free. But notice, this isn't passive. Make the best use is active. It's engaged. It's taking full advantage of your agency, and take the rest as it happens. Isn't resignation, it's wise acceptance of reality. This is the balance Epictetus teaches throughout the Enchiridion. Maximum agency over what you control, complete acceptance of what you don't. Tested under fire. Now I need to tell you a story, because the Enchiridion isn't just ancient wisdom, it's been tested in some of the most extreme circumstances imaginable. 1965. Vietnam War, a U.S. Navy pilot named James Stockdale is shot down over North Vietnam. He ejects, parachutes into a village, and is immediately captured. He would spend the next 7 years as a prisoner of war, tortured repeatedly, kept in solitary confinement, subjected to psychological warfare. His captors tried to break him, tried to use him for propaganda. And what sustained him? What kept him sane? What allowed him to maintain his dignity and even lead other prisoners in resistance? The Enchiridion. Stockdale had studied Stoic philosophy. He'd read Epictetus. And in that prison camp, with no books, no resources, nothing but his own mind, he drew on those teachings. He later wrote, "I never felt so free in my life. I was living on a higher plane than my captors." Think about that. A man in chains being tortured felt free because he understood what Epictetus understood. They could control his body. They couldn't control his mind. They couldn't touch his prohairesis. Stockdale used the dichotomy of control. I can't control being here. I can't control what they do to my body, but I can control my response. I can control whether I maintain my integrity. I can control whether I help my fellow prisoners. He used the principle about impressions and judgments. The torture was the impression. But his interpretation of it, whether he saw himself as a victim or as a man being tested, that was his choice. He practiced the evening review. Even in solitary confinement, he would mentally review his day. Where did he maintain his virtue? Where did he fall short? How could he do better tomorrow? The Enchiridion, this little handbook written 2,000 years ago by a former slave, sustained an American admiral through 7 years of hell. And when he came home, he didn't just survive. He came home with his character intact, his humanity intact, his freedom intact. That's the power of this philosophy. That's why it matters. Not because it's intellectually interesting, though it is, but because it works. In the worst possible circumstances, it works. Your portable philosophy. Now, you're probably not going to be a POW. You're probably not going to be tortured. But you're facing your own challenges, your own difficulties, your own moments when you feel powerless. Maybe it's a toxic work environment. Maybe it's a difficult relationship. Maybe it's health problems. Maybe it's financial stress. Maybe it's just the general anxiety of living in an uncertain world. The Enchiridion is for you too. The principles that sustain Stockdale in a Vietnamese prison camp can sustain you in your daily struggles. Because the philosophy is the same. The circumstances are different, but the human condition is the same. We all face things beyond our control. We all have to choose our responses. We all have to decide what kind of people we're going to be, and the Enchiridion gives you the tools. Not easy answers, not quick fixes, but real, tested, proven principles for living with dignity, courage, and freedom. You can read it in an afternoon. You can study it for a lifetime. Every time you come back to it, you'll find something new. Some insight you missed. Some principle you need right now. That's why it's called a handbook. It's meant to be used, worn, carried with you, referenced constantly. It's not a book you read once and put on the shelf. It's a manual for living. Epictetus never wrote it himself, but through Arrian's dedication, his wisdom became portable, accessible, available to anyone who needs it. And here we are 2,000 years later, still reading it, still learning from it, still being transformed by it. That's the mark of genuine wisdom. It doesn't age. It doesn't become obsolete. Because human nature doesn't change. The circumstances change, but the fundamental challenges of being human, those remain the same. All right, we need to have a serious conversation. Because Stoicism, real Stoicism, Epictetus's Stoicism, is powerful and life-changing. But there's a problem. It's being misunderstood, distorted, turned into something Epictetus would barely recognize. And that distortion is actually harmful. So before we go any further, we need to talk about what Stoicism is not. Because if you get this wrong, you'll miss the whole point. Worse, you might hurt yourself or others. Beware, toxic Stoicism. There's a version of Stoicism floating around, especially online, especially in certain circles, that's basically emotional repression with a philosophical veneer. It goes something like this. Real men don't show emotion. Suck it up. Don't complain. Be tough. Show no weakness. Never cry. Never admit you're struggling. Just power through. And people call this Stoicism. They quote Marcus Aurelius. They reference Epictetus. They act like they're following ancient wisdom. But here's the truth. That's not Stoicism. That's toxicity. That's emotional suppression, masquerading as philosophy. And it's dangerous. Let me be crystal clear. Epictetus never taught that you should suppress your emotions. Never taught that you should pretend you don't feel things. Never taught that vulnerability is weakness. What he taught was something completely different. Emotional intelligence. The ability to feel your emotions without being ruled by them. The capacity to acknowledge difficulty while choosing your response to it. There's a massive difference between, I feel angry, but I'm going to respond thoughtfully, and I'm going to pretend I don't feel angry and just bottle it up. The first is Stoicism. The second is a recipe for psychological disaster. What Epictetus actually taught. Let's get this straight. When Epictetus talks about managing emotions, he's talking about examining your judgments, understanding where your feelings come from, choosing your responses wisely. He's not saying don't feel. He's saying don't be enslaved by your feelings. Think about grief. Epictetus lost people he loved. Did he say don't grieve? No, he said grieve, but understand what you're grieving. Grieve the person, not your loss of them. Love them, but remember they were never yours to keep. Feel the sadness, but don't let it destroy you. That's not emotional suppression. That's emotional wisdom. Think about anger. Did Epictetus say never get angry? No, he said examine your anger. What judgment is creating it? Are you angry because someone violated your rights or because they didn't meet your expectations? Is this anger serving you or enslaving you? Can you respond to the situation effectively without being consumed by rage? That's not bottling up emotion. That's processing it intelligently. Think about fear. Epictetus faced torture. Did he claim he felt no fear? Of course not. But he didn't let fear make his decisions. He felt it, acknowledged it, and chose his response anyway. That's courage. Not the absence of fear, but action despite fear. See the difference? Real Stoicism doesn't deny your humanity. It doesn't demand you become a robot. It asks you to be fully human, feeling deeply but thinking clearly, experiencing emotions but not being controlled by them. The Stoic balance. Here's what healthy Stoicism looks like. You acknowledge your feelings. I'm feeling anxious about this presentation. You don't pretend you're not anxious. You don't beat yourself up for being anxious. You simply notice it. Then you examine the judgment creating the anxiety. I'm anxious because I'm judging that my worth depends on how well this goes. I'm anxious because I'm trying to control the audience's response, which isn't actually within my control. Then you choose your response. I can't control how they respond. I can control how well I prepare. I can control giving my best effort. I can control maintaining my dignity regardless of the outcome. The anxiety might not disappear. That's okay. You're not trying to eliminate all uncomfortable feelings. You're trying to respond to them wisely. This is emotional intelligence. This is self-awareness. This is what Epictetus actually taught. And notice, this requires you to be in touch with your emotions, not disconnected from them. You can't examine what you're not willing to feel. Resilience with compassion. Real Stoicism builds resilience. Absolutely. But not the brittle kind of resilience that comes from suppressing everything until you break. The flexible kind that comes from processing emotions healthily. And here's what's crucial. Stoic resilience includes compassion, for yourself and for others. Epictetus taught that we're all trying to do our best with the understanding we have. When someone wrongs you, they're acting from ignorance. They don't understand what's truly good. That doesn't excuse their behavior, but it helps you respond with wisdom rather than rage. And when you fall short, when you react badly, when you fail to live up to your principles, Stoicism doesn't say beat yourself up. It says learn, adjust, try again, be patient with your own growth. Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic emperor, wrote in his Meditations, "Be tolerant with others and strict with yourself." Not strict with yourself in a punishing way. Strict in holding yourself to high standards while being understanding of your humanity. This is strength without brittleness. This is resilience without rigidity. This is what Epictetus actually taught. The toxic version creates people who are hard on themselves, hard on others, emotionally shut down, unable to connect. The real version creates people who are strong but warm, resilient but compassionate, self-disciplined but self-aware. The warning signs. How do you know if you've crossed from healthy Stoicism into toxic territory? Here are the warning signs. You're using Stoicism to avoid dealing with real problems. I shouldn't be bothered by this becomes an excuse not to address a toxic situation. You're using it to judge others. They're weak for being upset becomes a way to feel superior. You're becoming emotionally disconnected. You're not processing feelings, you're just numbing them. You're losing empathy. You can't understand why others struggle with things that seem obviously within their control. You're becoming rigid. Everything is black and white. You've lost the flexibility and wisdom that real Stoicism requires. If you're experiencing any of these, stop. You've taken a wrong turn. This isn't what Epictetus taught. The right path. Here's what healthy Stoicism looks like in practice. You feel your emotions fully. You cry when you're sad. You laugh when you're happy. You acknowledge fear, anger, joy, grief, all of it. But you don't let emotions make your decisions. You feel them, process them, learn from them, and then choose your response based on your values and reason. You're compassionate with yourself and others. You understand that everyone is struggling with something. You're patient with growth, yours and theirs. You're emotionally intelligent. You understand where your feelings come from. You can communicate them effectively. You can sit with discomfort without being overwhelmed by it. You're strong but not hard. You can endure difficulty without becoming bitter. You can maintain your principles without becoming rigid. You're connected to yourself, to your emotions, to other people. Stoicism doesn't isolate you. It helps you engage with life more fully and wisely. That's what Epictetus taught. That's what the Enchiridion guides you toward. That's what sustained Stockdale without breaking him. Not emotional numbness, emotional mastery, not suppression, integration, not hardness, strength with humanity. The bottom line. If someone tells you Stoicism means never showing emotion, never asking for help, never admitting struggle, they're wrong. They're teaching something that would horrify Epictetus. Real Stoicism is about freedom, and you can't be free if you're enslaved to the need to appear strong. You can't be free if you're terrified of your own emotions. You can't be free if you're disconnected from your humanity. Epictetus was free because he was fully himself. He felt deeply, thought clearly, and chose wisely. He was vulnerable enough to love, strong enough to endure, wise enough to know the difference between what he could control and what he couldn't. That's the path. Not suppression, not hardness, not toxic masculinity dressed up as philosophy. Integration, wisdom, strength with compassion, resilience with humanity. That's what we're after. That's what the next section will explore. How Epictetus's real teachings have influenced history and can transform your life today. So we've got this former slave teaching in a small town in Greece nearly 2,000 years ago. He writes nothing. He publishes nothing. He's not seeking fame or influence. And yet his ideas have shaped Western civilization. They've influenced emperors, revolutionaries, therapists, and millions of ordinary people trying to live better lives. How does that happen? How does a philosophy forged in slavery become one of the most enduring and practical wisdom traditions in human history? Let's trace the journey. 2nd century, the Emperor's Handbook. Marcus Aurelius becomes Roman Emperor in 161 AD, about 60 years after Epictetus dies, and Marcus has arguably the most powerful position on earth. He commands armies. He rules an empire stretching from Britain to Egypt. He has wealth, status, everything the world considers valuable. And what does he do? He studies Epictetus obsessively. His personal journal, what we now call the Meditations, is filled with Stoic principles. And you can see Epictetus's influence on almost every page. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. That's pure Epictetus, the dichotomy of control. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. That's Epictetus's idea about welcoming challenges as opportunities for virtue. When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. That's Epictetus's morning preparation practice, anticipating difficulties so you can respond virtuously. Here's what's remarkable. The most powerful man in the world is using the philosophy of a slave to guide his life. He's not using his power to avoid difficulties. He's using Stoicism to meet them with wisdom and virtue. And the Meditations, Marcus's private journal, never meant for publication, becomes one of the most influential books in Western philosophy. Why? Because it shows Stoicism working at the highest level of power and responsibility. If these principles could help an emperor rule justly and maintain his humanity, they can help anyone. Renaissance, rediscovery, and humanism. Fast forward to the 15th and 16th centuries. Europe is rediscovering classical texts. Greek and Roman manuscripts are being translated, studied, circulated, and Epictetus becomes one of the most popular philosophers of the Renaissance. Michel de Montaigne, the father of the essay, one of the most influential thinkers of the period, is deeply influenced by Stoicism. His essays are full of Epictetus's ideas about self-knowledge, accepting mortality, living according to nature. Montaigne writes, "My life has been full of terrible misfortunes, most of which never happened." That's Epictetus. That's the idea that most of our suffering comes from our judgments about events, not the events themselves. The humanists loved Epictetus because he offered a philosophy that was practical, ethical, and focused on human dignity and agency. In an era of religious upheaval and social change, his teachings provided a framework for living well, regardless of circumstances. And here's what's interesting. Epictetus influenced both secular humanists and religious thinkers. Christian scholars found his ethics compatible with Christian virtue. His emphasis on providence resonated with theological ideas about divine order. The Enchiridion was translated into Latin, French, English, Italian. It was studied in universities. It shaped how educated Europeans thought about ethics, psychology, and human nature. Enlightenment, philosophy meets politics. By the 17th and 18th centuries, Stoicism is influencing political philosophy and the development of modern thought. Blaise Pascal, the mathematician and philosopher, engages deeply with Stoic ideas. He admires their ethics while questioning their confidence in reason. His pensées are in dialogue with Stoicism throughout. But here's where it gets really interesting. The American founders were steeped in Stoic philosophy. John Adams owned a 1715 Latin edition of the Enchiridion. He studied it, quoted from it, used its principles to navigate the revolutionary period and his presidency. Thomas Jefferson kept a copy of the Enchiridion in Greek. He recommended Epictetus to young people as essential reading for developing character. George Washington was influenced by Stoic ideas about duty, virtue, and service. His famous restraint, refusing to become king, voluntarily giving up power, that's Stoic virtue in action. Why did the founders love Epictetus? Because they were trying to create a new form of government. They were facing enormous challenges. They were risking their lives, their fortunes, their sacred honor. And Epictetus taught them that virtue matters more than outcomes, that you can only control your own character and actions, that you should focus on doing what's right regardless of whether you succeed. We mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. That's the end of the Declaration of Independence. And it's deeply Stoic. They're committing to virtue regardless of consequences. They're accepting what's beyond their control while taking full responsibility for what is within their control. Modern era, from philosophy to therapy. Now jump to the 20th century, and something remarkable happens. Stoicism becomes the foundation of modern psychotherapy. Aaron Beck, in the 1960s, is developing what becomes cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. And what's his core insight? That our thoughts about events, not the events themselves, create our emotional responses. Sound familiar? That's Epictetus. Men are disturbed not by things, but by the views which they take of them. Beck wasn't just borrowing metaphorically. He explicitly acknowledged the Stoic roots of CBT. The entire cognitive model, identify the thought, examine it, challenge it, replace it with a more rational thought. That's Stoic practice. And CBT becomes the most empirically validated form of psychotherapy. It works. It helps people with depression, anxiety, PTSD, addiction. It's taught worldwide. It's covered by insurance. It's mainstream. And it's essentially applied Stoicism. Ancient philosophy validated by modern science. Albert Ellis, who developed rational emotive behavior therapy, REBT, around the same time, was even more explicit. He said he was reviving Stoic philosophy for the modern age. He quoted Epictetus constantly. So now you have millions of people, who may have never heard of Epictetus, using therapeutic techniques that are directly descended from his teachings. The philosophy of a Roman slave is helping people in therapy sessions across the world. It's helping veterans with PTSD. It's helping people overcome anxiety and depression. It's helping people build resilience. Today, the Stoic Renaissance. And now, right now, we're living through a Stoic Renaissance. Books about Stoicism are bestsellers. Ryan Holiday's The Obstacle is the Way, Ego is the Enemy, The Daily Stoic. Millions of copies sold. Massimo Pigliucci's How to Be a Stoic, William Irvine's A Guide to the Good Life. There are Stoic podcasts, Stoic online courses, Stoic communities, Stoic Week, an annual event where thousands of people practice Stoic exercises together. Why now? Why is a 2,000-year-old philosophy experiencing this resurgence? Because we need it, maybe more than ever. We're living in an age of unprecedented uncertainty. Climate change, political polarization, pandemic, economic instability, social media anxiety, information overload. We have more comfort and convenience than any generation in history. And we're more anxious, more depressed, more overwhelmed. We have more choices than ever. And we're paralyzed by them. We have more information than ever. And we're more confused. And Epictetus offers something we desperately need. A clear framework for what matters. A practical method for managing our minds. A philosophy that actually works in difficult circumstances. The dichotomy of control is incredibly liberating in an age where we're constantly bombarded with things we can't control. Focus on what's yours. Let go of the rest. The emphasis on virtue over outcomes is powerful in a culture obsessed with results, metrics, success. Be a good person. Do the right thing. Let the outcomes take care of themselves. The practice of examining our judgments is essential in an era of manipulation, propaganda, and emotional reactivity. Think clearly. Question your assumptions, choose your responses, and the resilience practices. Morning preparation, evening review, welcoming challenges. These are tools for building psychological strength in a world that constantly threatens to overwhelm us. The through line. Here's what's remarkable about this legacy. From Marcus Aurelius to modern therapy, from Renaissance humanists to American founders, from ancient Rome to contemporary self-help, the core ideas remain the same. Focus on what you can control, accept what you can't, develop your character, examine your judgments, choose your responses, live virtuously regardless of outcomes. These principles have worked for emperors and slaves, soldiers and civilians, ancient Romans and modern Americans. They've worked in palaces and prison camps in times of prosperity and times of crisis. Why? Because they're based on something fundamental about human nature, about the human condition, about what it means to live well as a rational mortal being in an uncertain world. Circumstances change, technology changes, cultures change, but the core challenges of being human, dealing with loss, facing fear, managing desire, choosing how to respond to difficulty, these remain constant. And Epictetus's philosophy addresses these fundamental challenges with remarkable clarity and practicality. That's why his legacy endures. Not because it's intellectually impressive, though it is. Not because it's historically important, though it is. But because it works. In real life. For real people. Facing real challenges. A slave in ancient Rome and a stressed-out modern professional face different specific circumstances, but they face the same fundamental challenge. How do I live well? How do I maintain my dignity and freedom in a world I don't control? And Epictetus gives them the same answer. Master yourself. Focus on your character. Accept what you cannot change. Choose your responses wisely. That's freedom. That's the good life. 2,000 years later, we're still learning from him, still being transformed by his teachings, still discovering that the wisdom forged in slavery offers liberation to anyone willing to practice it. All right, so Epictetus has this incredible legacy. Great. But let's get specific, let's get personal. Why do you need this philosophy? Right now? In your actual life? Because here's the thing. We can appreciate Stoicism historically. We can admire it intellectually. But unless it actually helps you navigate your life better, it's just interesting trivia. So let's talk about 3 areas where Epictetus's teachings are urgently relevant to modern life. Navigating uncertainty. Let's be honest about the world we're living in. Climate change is real and accelerating. Political systems are unstable. The economy lurches from crisis to crisis. Pandemics happen. Technology is changing faster than we can adapt. The job you trained for might not exist in 10 years. And on a personal level, relationships are unpredictable. Health is fragile. Plans fall apart. Life doesn't go the way you expected. This is the water we're swimming in. Constant, pervasive uncertainty. And what's our typical response? Anxiety. We try to control things we can't control. We obsess over possible futures. We doom scroll, we catastrophize, we exhaust ourselves trying to eliminate uncertainty. Enter Epictetus. He lived through Nero's reign, one of the most chaotic, violent periods in Roman history. He experienced slavery, exile, political upheaval. If anyone understood uncertainty, it was him. And what does he teach? Don't try to eliminate uncertainty. You can't. It's part of life. Instead, develop the capacity to remain centered regardless of circumstances. The dichotomy of control is incredibly powerful here. You can't control whether there's a pandemic. You can control how you respond. You can't control the political situation. You can control whether you engage thoughtfully or react emotionally. You can't control whether you lose your job. You can control how you prepare, how you adapt, how you maintain your dignity in difficulty. This isn't denial. It's not pretending uncertainty doesn't exist. It's refusing to be enslaved by it. Think about your own life. What are you worrying about right now that's actually beyond your control? The election results? The stock market? Whether your kids make the right choices? Whether your project succeeds? Whether people like you? Epictetus would say, notice that you're spending energy on things you can't control. Redirect that energy to what you can control, your preparation, your effort, your character, your response. And here's what's remarkable. When you do this, you don't become passive. You become more effective. Because you're focusing your limited energy on things where it actually makes a difference. You can't control whether you get the job, but you can control how well you prepare for the interview. You can't control whether your business succeeds, but you can control the quality of your work, your integrity in business dealings, your resilience when facing setbacks. This is how you navigate uncertainty, not by eliminating it. You can't. But by developing an internal stability that holds regardless of external chaos. Don't seek to have events happen as you wish, but wish them to happen as they do, and you will go on well. That's not resignation, that's freedom. Freedom from the exhausting attempt to control an uncontrollable world. Building resilience. Now let's talk about mental health, because we're in a crisis. Anxiety disorders are epidemic, depression rates are skyrocketing, especially among young people. Burnout is everywhere, suicide rates are climbing. We're more connected than ever and more lonely than ever. And the response? Medication, therapy, self-care, all of which can be helpful. But there's something missing. We've lost the art of building psychological resilience. We've lost the practices that help people endure difficulty without breaking. Epictetus offers those practices, and they work. We know they work because they're the foundation of CBT, which is the most empirically validated therapy we have. The core insight: your thoughts create your emotions. Change your thoughts. Change your emotional experience. You're anxious about a presentation. CBT would ask, what thought is creating that anxiety? Maybe, my worth depends on this going well, or if I mess up, it will be catastrophic. Are those thoughts true? Are they helpful? What would be a more rational thought? That's pure Epictetus. Examine your judgments, challenge them, choose more rational ones. But Epictetus goes further. He doesn't just give you cognitive techniques. He gives you a whole philosophy of resilience. Resilience isn't just bouncing back from difficulty. It's growing through it. It's welcoming challenges as opportunities to develop virtue. It's maintaining your character regardless of circumstances. Remember his prayer, "Send me trials, for I have the means to endure them with honor." That's not toxic positivity. That's not denying that suffering is real. It's recognizing that you have capacities, reason, choice, character that can meet whatever comes. And the daily practices, morning preparation, evening review, examining your impressions, these build resilience the way physical exercise builds strength. Gradually, through consistent practice, think about your own mental health. What would change if you practiced these principles? Instead of catastrophizing about possible futures, you'd focus on what you can actually do today. Instead of being devastated by setbacks, you'd see them as opportunities to practice resilience. Instead of being enslaved by your emotions, you'd feel them fully, but choose your responses wisely. Instead of deriving your worth from external validation, you'd ground it in your character and effort. This isn't a cure-all. Mental health is complex. Sometimes you need professional help. Sometimes you need medication. But these practices, they're tools, proven tools, for building the kind of psychological strength that helps you weather life's storms. And here's what's beautiful. You don't have to wait until you're in crisis. You can build resilience now, through daily practice, through small choices, through gradually strengthening your capacity to meet difficulty with wisdom and courage. Ethical living in a complex world. Finally, let's talk about ethics, about how to live a good life in a morally confusing world. We're bombarded with competing values. Consumerism says happiness comes from acquiring things. Social media says it comes from likes and followers. Career culture says it comes from success and status. Self-help says it comes from self-actualization. And underneath all of it, a gnawing sense that none of this is actually working. That we're chasing things that don't satisfy. That we're living according to values we haven't actually chosen. Epictetus cuts through all of this with remarkable clarity. There's one thing that's genuinely good: virtue, excellence of character, being a good person. Everything else, wealth, health, reputation, pleasure, success, these are preferred indifference. Yeah, we'd prefer to have them, but they don't make you good or bad. They're morally neutral. What makes you good is how you use them, whether you maintain your integrity regardless of whether you have them. This is incredibly liberating in a culture obsessed with outcomes and appearances. You don't have to be successful to be good. You don't have to be wealthy to be good. You don't have to be famous or beautiful or accomplished to be good. You just have to be virtuous, to act with wisdom, justice, courage, and self-discipline, to take responsibility for your character, to choose rightly regardless of consequences. Think about the ethical dilemmas you face. At work, do you compromise your integrity to get ahead? In relationships, do you manipulate to get what you want? In politics, do you demonize those who disagree? In consumption, do you consider the impact of your choices? Epictetus would ask, what kind of person are you becoming through these choices? Are you developing virtue or vice? Are you acting with integrity or compromising it? And here's what's powerful. This framework works regardless of your other commitments. You can be religious or secular, conservative or progressive, traditional or unconventional. The question is always the same. Are you acting virtuously? Are you developing your character? Are you taking responsibility for who you're becoming? In a world of moral confusion, this clarity is precious. You don't need to figure out the meaning of life. You don't need to solve all philosophical questions. You just need to focus on becoming a better person, on acting with integrity, on developing virtue. First, say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. Decide what kind of person you want to be, then align your actions with that vision. That's it. That's the ethical life. The bottom line. So why does Epictetus matter now? Why should you care about a philosophy developed 2,000 years ago? Because the challenges he addressed, uncertainty, suffering, moral confusion, these haven't changed. The specific circumstances are different, but the fundamental human condition is the same. And his solutions: focus on what you control, examine your judgments, develop your character, choose your responses wisely. These still work. They worked for a slave in ancient Rome, they worked for an emperor, they worked for a POW in Vietnam, they work for people in therapy today, and they can work for you, not because they make life easy. They don't promise that, but because they make you capable of meeting life's difficulties with wisdom, courage, and dignity. And in an uncertain, anxious, morally confusing world, that's exactly what we need.